Ever wondered how those photographers get those perfect silky smooth waterfall or those crisp blue details in the sky without overexposing the photo? Well, the real trick might not be a high-end camera, but actually something else. Lens filters maybe? And no, we are not talking about Snapchat Insta filters, which are digital ones. We are talking about actual physical filters that go on top of your lens or camera device, whichever device you have, to take your photo or video quality to the next level. Now, if you've always wanted to instantly level up your photos and videos without spending a lot of money, then this video is definitely for you. Lens filters are absolutely a game changer provided they're used in the right way, especially if you're a beginner, and in this video we're gonna talk about them in detail so that you can understand what type of lens filter is suitable just for you. Now in today's video we're gonna talk about some essential filters which I personally own, and as a beginner I feel even you guys should know about them, and I'm also gonna talk about some fun and specialty filters which you can use to make your video and photo interesting and creative. So let's talk about them. By the way, if you're new on this channel, my name is Tanmay Sakpal. I make tech gear reviews and my user experience on using these gadgets and gizmos that I love, especially cameras, smartphones, action cams, drones, accessories like tripods, light, microphone, etc. You name it. We have many of those on this channel and my personal user experience about these gadgets. So if you're interested, definitely check out this channel and do subscribe. It's free for you guys, but it definitely helps me in creating more and more videos like this on this channel. Okay, so with that introduction, let's talk about these filters. Now before proceeding about these individual filters, do understand that these filters that I'm talking about, they pretty much come in different shapes and sizes. So no matter what device you have, if it has a camera, it's highly likely that the filter will be there for that particular camera. So if you have a smartphone, there are filters for smartphones. If you have an action cam, there are filters for action cam. If you have something like an interchangeable lens, kind of like this one, you have filters that go on top of the lens. So you have filters that come in different shapes and sizes, and they do pretty much the same thing depending upon what type of filter it is. So basically what I'm trying to say is there is an ND filter which will do the same work on a smartphone, on an action cam, or on a drone, or on an interchangeable lens. Okay, so point being, no matter what device you have, if you have a camera of any shape and size, these filters will definitely function the same way. Now in this video I'm gonna demonstrate interchangeable lens filters which come in a circular shape or even square sometimes, and they come in different sizes based on the diameter of the lens. So here's an example of ND filter which will basically go on top of the lens that I'm shooting right now with, which is the 15mm APS-C lens. I'm shooting on Sony a6700. So these are the type of filters that I have currently which I'm gonna talk about, but as I said, these filters come in all different shapes and sizes, so it's applicable to pretty much everyone who owns a camera of any sorts, even if it's a smartphone. Okay, so that was a lengthy intro, but let's now first talk about the very first filter, and this is the most basic filter, which is the UV filter. UV stands for ultraviolet. Now back in the early days of film photos or film cameras, UV filter had an essential functionality to block the ultraviolet rays, hence the name UV filter, ultraviolet ray filters. So basically these UV filters cut out UV light, which is basically not visible to our eyes or even new modern day digital cameras. So essentially the UV filter has now become more of a protective filter for your lens. What do I mean by that? So this is a UV filter which is basically a clear piece of glass that goes on top of your lens, kind of like this one. Okay, and it now becomes a protective layer on top of your lens. So why would you need that? Obviously because these lenses, especially the interchangeable lenses, are quite expensive, sometimes even more expensive than your actual camera body, and obviously you don't want the lens element to be directly exposed when you're outdoors. Let's say you're out in a very dusty environment, or you're outdoors in a rugged environment where there are high chances that your lens will get scratched up, and to protect that, this UV filter acts as a really good solution. So as a beginner, as someone who goes outdoors and does a lot of photography outdoors where there is a lot of dust, wind, your lens can get scratched up, your lens can get smudged up, I always put this UV filter on top of my lens, and in fact I can just add it right now on top of the lens that I am shooting this video on, and I don't think you'll see any noticeable difference. That is because it is only cutting down on UV light, which is actually not even visible to our eyes, as well as it is not sensitive to this digital sensors. As I said, UV filters were used on film cameras back in the days when those cameras were sensitive to UV light to cut down on the haziness in the photos. Okay, that was its original purpose. But in modern day digital cameras, the UV filters are used basically as a protective layer to protect the lens. So that is the main functionality, and as I said, as a beginner, I would highly recommend that you guys do have a UV filter on your lens, especially if you have an expensive lens. You don't want your lens to get scratched up. If you get this UV filter scratched up, you can always replace it. These are not very expensive, although I would request and recommend that you get a decent quality UV filter, because according to many professionals, these UV filters does affect image quality slightly, and if you buy a very cheap one, then it will also kind of affect the color quality. So it shifts the color a little bit depending upon how cheap that UV filter is. So I don't want to promote any brand right now over here. I have the KNF concept filters that I have for these interchangeable lenses, and if you want to know more about this brand or these set of filters, then let me know in the comments. I will talk about those. Okay, so this was a quick first essential filter, that is the UV filter. Nothing much about it, just a protective piece of glass on top of your lens. Now let's talk about the second essential filter, which I think is pretty cool, and that is the circular polarizing filter. Now it's a mouthful. Circular polarizing filter, also known as CPL filter, we'll call it CPL filter, and it has a very special feature or special functionality, which is to cut down on reflections, glares, and enhance the vibrance and enhance the colors in high contrast situations, such as if you're shooting landscape photos, if you're shooting scenery photos. It brings out the vibrant colors more and brings out a little bit more flavor to the overall photo. And to actually see its working, let's jump to a clip where I show you the real world functionality of a CPL filter. Okay, so let's take a real world example of a circular polarizing filter. Right now what you can see on the screen is I'm recording a bowl of water which has a lot of reflection. So it's just a bowl of water that I keep for the birds in my window. And right now on the surface of the water you can see there is a lot of reflections. Also notice the exposure is slightly high. It's +1 on the metering mode. You can see +1, right? So currently I don't have any circular polarizing filter on the lens. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this CPL filter. This is a circular polarizing filter, if you guys can see, and I'm just gonna slap it up on the lens. And now if you see in the video, you can see the reflections are significantly lower. Now as I twist and turn this circular polarizing filter, you can see the reflections will either come back or go away depending upon how much I twist the circular polarizing filter. So I'll just twist it and you can see there are still a lot of reflections. Now let me twist it again, and now you can see the bottom of the bowl as well. Now obviously do note that not the entire reflections and all the glares are going to be completely eliminated. You will still see quite a lot of reflections, but you can at least see the bottom of the bowl. And if I just remove it out, you can see the reflections come back again. Also do note that when I slap on the CPL filter again, I do lose a little bit of stop of light, and now you can see -1 on the metering mode. So understand that you're going to lose 1 or 2 stops of light when you attach a CPL filter onto your lens. But this is how it can cut off glares and reflections of reflective surfaces like water or glass. So maybe you're in shallow waters doing underwater photography and there is a lot of reflection. You can use this circular polarizing filter, and depending upon how much you twist and turn it at a certain degree, it will cut out the glares. So you can see live, I am just twisting and the glares either come back or they completely go away depending upon what angle I am at with the CPL filter. So that was a pretty cool example, right? Where as I twisted the CPL filter, the reflection from the water was significantly reduced. So another use case of this CPL filter is to increase the color pop in the photo, especially if you're shooting landscape photos where you're shooting in the bright sunny days and you want clouds to look a little bit more rich. The blue skies will become a little bit more rich in the blue color. Also some foliage and greenery around can be a little bit more enhanced using the CPL filter. So it's a very cool tool. Do note that it will cut down a little bit of the light, but depending upon what type of photography you're doing, CPL filter can definitely add a little bit of more flair in your photos, a little bit more of a X factor, so to speak, in your photos. And I highly recommend you have a CPL filter on you, especially in certain situations. And an added benefit can be that a CPL filter can also add as a protective layer on top of your lens, right? It's again a piece of glass that is in front of your lens, so your lens directly is not in contact with the environment. And if you get your CPL filter scratched, you can always buy a new one. It's going to be much more affordable compared to the actual lens. So that's a CPL filter. Now let's talk about the third and very important, very essential filter, which I feel can be used pretty much all the time, especially if you're outdoors in bright daylight. And that is neutral density filter. Neutral density filters, also known as ND filters, act like sunglasses for your lenses. So basically they cut down on the harsh light by a certain degree of intensity, and that degree of intensity is given by a stop number, so generally denoted by a number like ND2, ND4, ND16, ND64, and higher the number, higher the intensity of light it will cut down on. And they come in multiple flavors. So there are hard stops, meaning that it will only cut X amount of light, or they also come in different type of variable ND filter, where as you twist the filter, the intensity will increase or decrease depending upon what direction you twist the filter. Now instead of talking about this ND filter, let me show you how it functions in real world. So let me take you to a real world scenario. Okay, so now what I'm gonna demonstrate is the use case of a ND filter. So right now what you're seeing on the screen is I'm recording in manual mode, and on the metering mode you can see +2, which means that the image is overexposed, the video is overexposed, there is a lot of light. And let's just assume that I want to cut out this light without changing the settings. I mean, of course I can drop down the ISO over here, or raise my shutter speed, or reduce my aperture, but I don't want to touch this exposure triangle, and I want to still cut down on light using some other mechanism. This is where this neutral density filter will come into picture. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to attach this at the front of the lens. So there you go, I've attached the ND filter over here. And now if I go on the screen, you can see immediately, if you see the metering mode, it's showing +0.7, which means that it is already cut down on light significantly, because it's a ND8 to ND128. So the ND8 has already cut down on some amount of light. But now I can also twist on the variable ND filter. Because it's a variable ND, I can reduce the light further by simply turning the variable filter in a circular way. So you can see right now I'm just turning the filter, and on the metering mode we have 0, which means we've achieved perfect exposure. I can still go ahead and reduce the brightness or the light and cut down on the light further. If I reduce it even further, you can see I can go even more dark, and now it is showing -1, meaning that it is underexposed by one stop. So what I'm doing is I'm increasing the intensity of the ND, which is cutting out on more light, and if I even turn it more, I can even make it dark, and I can go till -2. So I'm losing a lot of light now. Now this is significantly underexposed. So I have turned the dial all the way up to ND128, and you can see the image has become much more darker, and that is not exactly what I want to achieve. I want to achieve a proper balanced exposure, so I can just turn it around again and get a plus or get a 0 value. So this is properly exposed according to the metering mode, and obviously I can change it on the fly whenever I want without touching any of the exposure triangle, that is the ISO, shutter speed, aperture, or any of the settings on the camera. So that's the purpose of a ND filter. So that was just one example of how an ND filter can be used to reduce the exposure, reduce the light. ND filters are also used to do slow shutter photography, where when you reduce the shutter speed to a certain degree, you get a lot of motion blur, and that is an artistic choice of people to do a little bit of slow shutter photography. But when you reduce the shutter speed extremely low, the exposure goes very high, especially when there is a lot of light. So ND filters can enable you to reduce that light without having to increase the shutter speed. So you can do slow shutter photography, and that's how you actually get those silky smooth waterfall photos where you have slow shutter. So that's why the waterfall feels like a silky smooth layer of foam going through the environment. It's pretty cool to look at. Or you can also do slow shutter photography in urban street photographies, where you see those streaks of light of vehicles going around. So that is again slow shutter photography, where many times ND filters are used. So that was the third and the last filter which I feel is an essential filter. Now moving on to something like a specialty filter, which I feel is not really essential as a beginner or even at intermediate level, because these filters are specialty filters which you may or may not need, and they are very niche depending upon the use case. One such filter is light pollution filter, which basically, as the name suggests, cuts down on artificial light in cities. So let's say you're doing astrophotography but you live in a very light polluted city like Mumbai or Pune or some other fancy metropolitan city. In such situations, obviously doing night photography or astrophotography is absolutely a pain, and to enhance or to improve that experience, light pollution filters can help you cut down the artificial light and actually get more detailed shot of the night sky. That is the main purpose of light pollution filter. So another specialty filter can be an anamorphic filter, and depending upon if you are into cinematography, if you're shooting some short films or if you're shooting some video which needs artistic taste, anamorphic filters create those very cool light streaks in the video. You might have seen those. I'll put some examples on the screen. And this kind of look can be achieved using anamorphic filters. Those are quite expensive and not everyday use, but they're pretty cool as filters, and you guys can just research about them in case you're getting into cinematography. Another cool specialty filter is also called as mist filter, which gives this soft glowing like footage, which is also again a artistic taste and not always used. It is used sometimes to give that dreamy look, especially during slow motion shoots and cinematic shoots, and you want to give it a dreamy vibe. So this filter basically just softens the entire footage basically and gives it a little bit of a glow. And depending upon the type of glow you have, golden glow or a dark glow, etc, etc, you have different variations of this filter, but primarily it is called as a mist filter. Okay, so these were some specialty filters. I don't really have all of them. I only have one of them, which is a light pollution filter, and truth be told, I have literally used it only once in this entire 1 year of owning that filter, when I went outdoors to do astrophotography. So it's a very specialty, very niche filter. I'm pretty sure 99% of you guys don't really need that. But the first three filters, which is the UV filter, the CPL filter and ND filter, I think are pretty much a must have to level up your photography, videography skills, especially if you're getting into the hobby of shooting photos and videos and you want to level up your skills. Okay, so I'm gonna conclude this video over here, and before I go, if you are interested in purchasing any of these filters, I will share some links in the video description. Not to promote any particular brand, but I've been using the KNF filters and I think they're pretty decent. They're not super expensive, but they're not super cheap as well. So they are kind of in the middle when it comes to price point, but they have a very good feature, which is they are magnetic. The ones that I have, they simply just attach magnetically to the lens. So I have these magnetic lens filters, which just makes the process of attaching and detaching them much more faster rather than screwing them and unscrewing them. So that is a hassle. So yeah, I'll drop some links of some filters in the video description. Do check it out if you're interested in buying any of them. If you have any questions about any particular filters, or if you want me to specifically review this KNF concept filters that I actually have an entire bundle of them. So I have the variable ND, this is the variable ND, I have the UV filter, I have the CPL filter, I also have a hard stop ND 1000, all from KNF, all the magnetic range. So I can talk about them specially in a separate video. If you want to know more, let me know in the comments. Do like this video. If you have queries, as usual, put them in the comments. If you have any particular filters which you really love and you want to share some experience, definitely let me know in the comment section. This is Tanmay Sakpal signing off. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.